Everyone to the Humanising Work live series. This is the second week that we've been doing these, so if you're joining us again, welcome back. I hope they've been really useful and valuable. If this is your first time, welcome. Enjoy the next 30 minutes with myself and Richard. We're going to be talking today about clarity. So all things clarity, how do I get clarity? How do I ensure others have clarity around my vision, around this project or activity, or even our plan for the year, plan for the 3 years, the longer term. So clarity in all meanings of the word. I'm joined, as I said, by Richard, who, if you haven't already seen the first one that Richard did with us, it's awesome. Look back, have a look on the Bailey and French LinkedIn page, have a look on the YouTube. It was a really good session, Richard. So welcome back.
Thanks, Anthony. Yeah, it's good to be back. Good to have the first session with you as well. So I'm looking forward to discussing clarity in more detail. And last time was psychological safety. So I just want to say I feel safe in this environment to do lots of sharing with you, and let's see where this journey takes us today.
Yeah, absolutely. And we were talking just before we went live. You get a little sneak peek behind the scenes here. We were talking about how wonderful would it be now that the pubs are open in the UK and elsewhere, actually, that maybe someone somewhere out there is watching this from the pub as they work remotely from a pub. Maybe. If you are, message, because it would be great. It would be great to know what that feels like. So yeah, let's jump in, Richard. We've got a lot to go through, and we'll probably go off topic, and we've only got 30 minutes. So let's jump straight in with kind of that first question, which is around what does it mean to have clarity, and also how do we ensure that people get greater clarity?
Well, I think the first part, what does it mean the impact of having greater clarity, I think, is it shows up with lots of stuff that isn't happening. Pretty like those ad hoc discussions about people like, oh, I thought we said this and I thought you said that, and those discussions that nobody plans for, and also those meetings where like, so what's happened since last time, and the answer is nothing because no one knew what they were supposed to be doing. That's kind of the shorter or medium term thing. Yeah. And if you get rid of that, I think people are less tired, less stressed, because they at least have some part of their work. There's stuff you can't control, but at least they have some part where they're clear about what is expected, what they should do, what that's going to look like, what it's going to sound like, what everybody else is doing, and you're building a picture. At least you're able to color in some of the images on that big canvas, and at least there's something you can hold on to.
Yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it? Because those emotions and those things that you feel, the stress, the when you don't have clarity, it's almost your body's reaction going, hey, you haven't got clarity, pay attention, go and ask some questions. It's almost a guidance, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's kind of you have cycles there. If you don't have clarity and you want to go and ask questions, and if you're not sure who you're supposed to ask or where you're supposed to go, or even what question it is you're supposed to be asking, but there's something, then you're just going to spiral. Yeah. And you just get more stressed, more unsure. And even if there's things you probably are clear on, if it's in the context of complete lack of clarity, you probably won't be confident to act on it because it doesn't fit together. It's not integrated. You don't have that feeling or that confidence, and that you won't be self-assured, even if it's something you're practiced at.
Yeah, and you touched on it because it was your session, and it's so prominent to then bring you into this conversation around clarity, because having the safety to go, I don't mean to be the person of the group here that asks the awkward question, but I have no idea what's going on right now. That takes a bit of courage, right?
Yeah, it's a really good point, because saying I don't know is kind of frowned upon in quite a lot of contexts, unfortunately, even though it's a very valid response for when you're dealing with the uncertainty of the world. You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, next week, next month, or particularly not next year, as we've learned over the last year or so. So it is having that strength, but it has that environment. And then I suppose the other side to that is with psychological safety, it must be easier to build clarity because people can speak up, but clarity doesn't just happen.
Yeah.
Because people tend to be, it's hard to pin people down on details, specifics, and and that can still leave you in a bit of no man's land, probably.
Yeah. Yeah, and you touched on a really good point. How can we be clear when we're not clear on, or we're completely uncertain, or maybe not completely uncertain, but definitely uncertain, even if not completely uncertain about what's going to happen around the corner? Does that mean that clarity has become less important or more important?
Oh, I think my idea would be that I would say my gut instinct would be to go with it's more important, because if outside in your personal life and social life is really uncertain, to have a little bit of certainty at work could probably go a long way to get people settled, get people grounded. How to do that, I think, is probably start small. What can you be clear on? Where can you build in certainty? And that could be, what's the meeting rhythm? Like, is it every Friday at 9:30 a.m.? And we stick to it, and we do that, and we know that at least one time of the week that we're all going to be there, and we're all going to be able to speak, and we know what we're going to talk about. So have an agenda and a theme, or at least we know who's going to be there and roughly what's going to be talked about. And then you've got half an hour a week where you're like, at least this is my safe space. Even if the topic is tough, at least it's clear.
That's good. Yeah, that's good. One of the practices we talk about, isn't it? It's that regular check-in, and not just from a performance and well-being point of view, although actually it's good to build those elements in to those mini check-ins. And whether you're doing that with your team we do them here 3 times a week. So quickly on a Monday, quickly on a Wednesday, quickly on a Friday, each with slightly different agendas and different purposes and meanings as to why we do them. But you're right, at least having that 5, 10, 15 minutes of complete safety with people that you trust around a specific outcome.
And I think, and that helps if you're the person leading the meetings or organizing the meetings and it's your team, you'll get a bit more clarity about where people are psychologically, where they are physically, and then you can be, if you're going to build up tasks or put them on projects or assignments or just have those discussions, at least you can sense a bit better. Okay, I need to push a bit harder, I need to ask a few more questions, or you can tailor your approach based on what you're seeing in those moments, rather than going blind. I think it is having an ounce of clarity is where you can start from, rather than I need to have everything pinned down, have it all timetabled. That isn't going to work. It'd be beautiful, everyone would like it. Well, not necessarily everyone, but people would some like that security, but it's unrealistic.
Yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it? Because we were talking about this a little bit before we jumped on. When people are so different and they want different things, clarity means different things to so many different people within your team. So how do you as a leader make sure that everyone is clear? Because I can be clear on what I think you've said, but I'm not necessarily clear on what you've actually meant. So how do we as leaders check in on that a little bit more frequently or differently? You had some good pointers.
Well, this one, I mean, I think you start with the conversation a little bit, because then you're opening it up. Say, like, for a vision, this is the vision, and possibly you say, how does that tie in with your personal vision, and see how they overlap and they morph together. And that's a great start, because you're opening up, you're being very human in terms of a bit of empathy and compassion and openness and trust, and building that environment, which is perfect. And I think the next step is, we're also human, and we're going to forget lots of stuff, and what you remember will be skewed by what happens next, what happened before, maybe the length of time between the discussions about this thing. So some kind of record of what was, and I think it'd be good for it to be a collaborative effort. So just this is the vision, and then everyone else write their notes and reflections on it, and have it as a live document. You know, there's loads of. I mean, the advantage now is there's loads of tools for it. If we learn to use them and make it a habit to use them, and there's those two parts. But it's there, and then next time you can go back and say, oh, we said that last time. How do we feel about that? And just check in on. Oh, actually, I'm not feeling that anymore. I did say it, but now 2 weeks later it's different. And I think because clarity is probably a moving target in a lot of things. But what is my role? What am I supposed to achieve? How am I supposed to achieve it? Because if it's too fixed, I suppose you're bound by something that might not be in service of the the vision or the purpose or the that particular role as it is defined. So it's kind of you check in on what it is you're trying to do, and also how you're trying to do it, and how you're trying to get there.
Yeah, I love that. It's how do you write it down? How do you keep coming back to it? There's a discipline to the art. When we're dealing with people, it can sometimes feel a bit of an art. Different situations, different people, personalities, different times of day even affect us differently. So it feels like a bit of an art, but there is a discipline to it as well. I'm going to come back to your point around how, though, because it's a really interesting one. So we've got clarity on vision and what we're doing, but you said about how, and that's kind of when we talk about strengths and having clear understanding of who we've almost got around us. There's almost another element of clarity there, isn't there? I know what I'm doing and I know why, and I've got clarity on it. Maybe now I need to be clear on who can help me and who's around me and what that support system looks like.
Yeah, and I think one thing I've seen, or that can work here is, and it takes a bit of effort, but it's bear with me. It's assigning roles to do those things that you need as a leader, not people. Of course, people will fulfill the roles, but if that person isn't in the right space or they're busy, you can still ask someone to be substituted in to take on the role. So if it's kind of tech support, it doesn't have to be person A from IT. It could be anybody that understands this bit of software. So like, it's tech support on what? Okay, Alex can do it. Sam can do it. Cool. So first, Alex is going to do that role for a month. If Alex gets busy, we know we go to Sam, and so there's a role that needs to be filled, and then we fill it with the people after. So it's kind of like an extra step. So you're not saying, "Hey, Anthony, that is your job." It's very clear, but it's also clear that there's a downside to that, is that if you don't do it, it doesn't get done. Or if you're not around, or you leave, or you get sick or something, especially so getting sick has been the biggest thing in the last year or so. What happens then? We just stop.
Yeah.
And I think so. Crafting those roles with specifics, and then the people that can do it, and then that takes time.
Yeah.
Then you can rotate them to leverage people's strengths at different times. So I don't know. It's tough, but you have to know your people, and you also have to know what you want and what you need as the leader, as the project manager, as the whole company.
Yeah. It's such an interesting point, isn't it? Because you do really have to know the situation, the people, the role, what you're looking to achieve. Like, you have to have clarity on an awful lot of things. And I guess it is about having that psychologically safe conversation where you just throw those questions out, you test, you constantly as a leader have to, I guess, experiment with people's understanding. You're not testing them, but you've just got to check in more frequently. We do a kind of bit of pop quiz every now and again that just goes around, and I guess that's a good way of doing it and just checking. Hey, do you remember that thing that we talked about 2 months ago that you've probably forgotten about? If I just quick fire questions to you, do you remember it? And also just the fact that you don't remember it, it's okay, but now you can go away and find out. It's interesting how different teams are doing this and getting clear on all of those different elements.
And I think something like called, one way of describing it is the zones of genius. Like, what is it that your team members can what are they passionate about, what have they got the skill set for, and that they self-identify it as that. And if you go back and revisit those things, and also probably what have you been using recently, so if you've got the skill and you haven't been using it, you might be doing great work, but are we really pushing the kind of steering this in the right direction? I don't like the word push, steering this in the right direction. So I think it is interesting to keep revisiting not just what people say, but how they reflect on themselves, the skills, how they're using, how they're applying it, and possibly what they don't have. I mean, it's also as important when we're skills-based, if you strengths-based, if it's like I'm good enough at this, I want to get better, then if people can identify that, then it helps you see, I suppose, the natural inclination of the team of where it can go, rather than, hey, we need you to do this because you need to be good at that. Rather than, I have this strength, how can I build on it? And I probably need dick, and now hopefully people will know or feel comfortable saying it.
Yeah, and I suppose that's then where the role of the team member. There's a really great comment on the chat feed there, following your point, which is around the role that the other team members play. This isn't just a top-down leader has to get clarity and gain clarity. Actually, there's a cohesion piece here where everyone needs to understand each other's. And I'm thinking about that not just from to be successful in this project or task, but actually also from a career development point of view or general development. I want to learn these things, or I haven't been able to do this thing or stretch this strength, and actually clarity is also around those points, but within the team as well. There's a lot of points coming through on the chat, but that's just a few of the things. And I'll put it up on the screen, but it's quite long, and there's quite a lot in there that you want to digest. But thank you for the comment. Yeah, that's an interesting one, isn't it, Richard? Yeah,
and it is. It's really important nowadays. I think I think that's another thing. The leader or leaders have to know that it isn't all on them to be making these decisions or definitions or whatever you want to call them, and people have to take it on themselves, and I think that, or even design it themselves, role design, or if it's a project like this is my responsibilities and my accountabilities, I will write them down, and everybody decides. Sure, maybe the leader can have a veto on something that is really far out, but generally people can keep themselves in check. If you've got the right people on the team, then it should be okay. Still need to support and encourage and coach and nurture that, but you don't need to control and manage and kind of supervise the action. It's more, how do we set it up right? How do we check in? How do we know what it is we're trying to achieve? And letting people have hands-on and a hands-on approach to that is going to probably have a lot more value to each person, because they say, I'm going to do this, rather than you should do this. It's quite different. Yeah, and the whole engagement piece, we know this as we come back to the return to work, but it's a different work, it's hybrid, it's maybe slightly differently. Having that kind of approach where everyone is a little bit accountable for the role that they play in gaining clarity on roles, strengths, people's past experiences. We're joining teams now where people have never met. They don't know how tall people are, and we can play all sorts of fun games around it. But actually, it's a really interesting one that we have to be a bit more proactive, all of us, and the role of clarity is everyone's. And then that stops this whole kind of command and control element that you just mentioned. And also made me think of, because you don't know people, it's virtual, there'll be people doing asynchronous teams as well. So it's all through the occasional time zone stretch meeting on Zoom or whatever, but it might be you stick it in email or Teams or, I don't know, Slack or whatever, and you put out a message and someone follows up, and it's all, that's an extra level of difficulty, because you won't all be even in the same time, and if you don't have the clarity there or some way to find out the clarity, so that could be another designated role, like the clarity monitors. Like, I'm not sure, and my first port of call should always be Anthony, because he might not know the answer, but at least he has a really good understanding of who might have the answer, and that doesn't have to be the leader. It might actually be better not being the leader, because you won't get into trouble or put under pressure, or you won't feel the anxiety of talking to a senior member of staff. And I think that is another thing we have to deal with. But even if you are in the same time zone, it's the same thing. Everyone's got different work habits when it's work from home, and not everyone's transitioning back yet. So that's a difficult one.
Yeah, I love that though. I love the idea of we should be empowering and almost expecting, actually. It's a little bit more than just engaging and empowering. It's expecting all team members as part of the team to communicate and engage and connect together, even if that is without the leader. Hey, can I just check something with you? I wasn't quite sure on that point that Ant just made there. Can I check that with you? Did you understand that? And if we don't understand it, both of us, then that's okay. Then we need to come back together in those discipline moments that we were talking about earlier, or revert back to that spreadsheet or Teams or whatever platform you've decided to use, and go and find out. Or if you can't find out, then you need to all come back together. But it's driven by the team, I guess, is the point there. I like that an awful lot. We've talked a lot actually about practical tips, and I'm conscious there's only 9 minutes left, which will feel like it goes very quickly. I'm thinking more about the practical tips and ways that maybe you've supported hybrid teams and teams that are maybe global as well, working remotely. What are some of the more tangible, practical tips that we can take away from these conversations, do you think?
That's good. I think one thing that's kind of top of mind, discussing just last week with a team, a new team across different geographical regions, and they didn't go for the team charter thing because they're kind of clear on the job at hand, but they'd never worked together. So they're this idea of kind of the guide to me. So my likes, dislikes, how I like to receive feedback, how I like to give feedback, how I like to work, and kind of people do a document, add photos and images and colors, and they share that. And so it's not just my strengths, but it's like also building up a bigger picture of who I am, what I like, and you can see people's preferences literally at the click of a button. And that is something I think is really, really interesting to see how that works, because that's the stuff you pick up on automatically at work. Like, Anthony likes tea and Sandy likes coffee, and it's like, okay, cool. So that's the question. You don't say, oh, let's have a Zoom call over coffee. No, Anthony, it's tea. You kind of, the small things that it help build that connection. Yeah, and
it's tea, and it's at 12 o'clock, and it's all of those things. And obviously that's an example in the office, but I like that. And I also like the fact that it's tea, and you didn't say yellow, green, blue, ENTJ. You've gone into the human side, which I guess is all what this is about. Go and have a conversation with someone to find out the things that make them human, that will give you the psychological trust that you need to be able to collaborate, connect, and work together and gain clarity together, no matter what you're doing, no matter how small the task, so that you get all of those benefits that you talked about right back at the beginning. Greater sense of well-being, kind of that, if my personal life and the world out there is uncertain, at least I'm clear at work. I've got something to hold on to, I guess. I really like that example that you've just given.
And it adds to the expectation management, because if, for example, I say, I'm not going to check my emails after 4:30 every day, but I will start checking them again at 7 a.m.
Yeah.
You send one at 4:31, and you're like, why hasn't he responded? Like, oh yeah, Richard doesn't respond now. I have to wait until 7 a.m. But it'll be there before I start work at 9. Like, if people have these different habits, time zones or not, at least you have that expectation. You have the understanding of how somebody else is going to approach something which is different to you, but it's there, it's out there, and people get comfortable with it. They might not like it, but just knowing helps.
Yeah.
Kind of the empathy side.
Yeah. Yeah, and those boundaries are a whole different topic that we could probably spend a whole another half an hour on. But creating those boundaries is also part of the clarity piece. I'm going to use an example that we haven't done yet actually internally, but Dan came up with this in our team. Dan, if you're listening, this was your idea, definitely wasn't mine, and it's an awesome idea. And it was building on what you've just said about really understanding and getting to know the human behind everything from who you were as a child, and get some baby pictures, and let's share some life moments that mean the most to you, and actually just sharing those as pictures or just as stories. And equally, if you don't want to share those things, that's also okay. You can share other things that are meaningful to you, books or stories or songs or whatever it is, but just help us to understand who you are under the surface, and get to know that human side to you a little bit more. And when we say human side, we just mean everything about you as a unique individual, don't we? And I love that idea, because I think that will really help just really understand those little preferences that you've just said. Oh, but I don't just see that Richard is clocking off at 4 or 4:30. I actually see that he's doing that because of his family, or there's another reason, or I get to know you a little bit more.
And you can adapt to try and, you might have to adapt to say, well, I'll do this first so I can get it to Richard by then, and then I can get a response or some support, and then you can change your work flow around if it's possible. And it's an interesting take. And I like that idea about learning more about people. And last week, part of a leadership program I was involved in, not my activity, but someone that was running it said they did an activity called their leadership amulets, and the people just took any object. It was supposed to be anything you could get in your hand, but it could be, and ended up being anything that people had in their homes, because everyone was working from home. And it's like, this thing signifies my leadership journey, or an inspiration, or a role model, or they had something, anything from a mug to a bike to a pen, or even something really obscure, an item of clothing, and it had a story. And you use an item to tell the story that helps you understand how that person got to where they are today.
That's brilliant. And I love how practical this conversation has got. These are really simple, practical ways that we can engage our team in a conversation. That's the point, right? Let's have a conversation. Let's not just rely, and there is a place for assessments and things, but actually what we're trying to do here is have a conversation with someone about who they really are, and in the service and the purpose of gaining greater clarity, right?
Yeah, and then things will just be all around better. It's not just clarity is the end game. Clarity is great for making people feel more secure, have a better mental state, increase their well-being, and the work will be better, the performance will be slicker, I would guess, in most cases, and the outcomes will be at least more tangible, because you know what you're trying to get. And success or failure, you'll be clear which one it is.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, and what learnings along the way.
Yeah.
And as long as you check back in, because this is fluid. You said that right at the beginning, right? This is a fluid. You don't have clarity, and then it's a right done, tick. That's that part of the project done. It's a continuous thing, right? Clarity on strengths, people, personalities, ways of working, but also, as you've just said, performance. Can we check in and have clarity on what our expectations are for X, Y, Z? Can we get clarity on people's different perspectives of what success means to each other, and their career, and all of those different elements? There's a lot there, isn't there, in what it means to gain clarity. I'm very conscious of time. As I said, those 9 minutes flew. We're going to have to jump off. Thank you so much, Richard, for joining us again.
I loved it. It was great. Thank you.
Yeah, it's been awesome. Thank you. Same time for those of you who are joining tomorrow's session. Same time again tomorrow. So join us then. And thank you for joining us this time. Everything is recorded. If you haven't already checked out Richard's session on psychological safety, do so. It's on LinkedIn and YouTube. Until next time, bye-bye.